The Path of Purification, Visuddhimagga, of Bhadantācariya Buddhaghosa, published by Buddhist Publication Society, Kandy, Sri Lanka. Part 2. Concentration, Samadhi.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Chapter 4. The Earth Kasina. Extracts passage 54 to 73. There are, besides 7 things that lead to the arising of the investigation of state's enlightenment factor. 1. Asking questions. 2. Making the basis clean. 3. Balancing the faculties. 4. Avoidance of persons without understanding. 5. Cultivation of persons with understanding. 6. Reviewing the field for the exercise of profound knowledge. 7. Resoluteness upon that investigation of states. 11 things lead to the rising of the energy enlightenment factor. 1. Reviewing the fearfulness of the states of loss, such as the hell realms, etc. 2. Seeing benefit in obtaining the mundane and supramundane distinctions dependent on energy. 3. Reviewing the course of the journey to be travelled thus. The path taken by the Buddhas, Pachika Buddhas, and their great disciples has to be taken by me, and it cannot be taken by an idler. 4. Being a credit to the alms food by producing great fruit for the givers. 5. Reviewing the greatness of the Master thus. My Master praises the energetic, and this unsurpassable dispensation that is so helpful to us is honored in the practice, not otherwise. 6. Reviewing the greatness of the heritage thus. It is a great heritage called the good Dhamma that is to be acquired by me, and it cannot be acquired by an idler. 7. Removing stiffness and torpor by attention to perception of light, change of postures, frequenting the open air, etc. 8. Avoidance of idle persons. 9. Cultivation of energetic persons. 10. Reviewing the right endeavors. 11. Resoluteness upon that energy. 11 things lead to the rising of the happiness enlightenment factor. The recollections. 1. Of the Buddha. 2. Of the Dhamma. 3. Of the Sangha. 4. Of virtue. 5. Of generosity. And 6. Of deities. 7. The recollection of peace. 8. Avoidance of rough persons. 9. Cultivation of refined persons. 10. Reviewing encouraging discourses. 11. Resoluteness upon that happiness. So by arousing these things in these ways, he develops the investigation of state's enlightenment factor and the others. This is how he exerts the mind on an occasion when it should be exerted. How does he restrain the mind on an occasion when it should be restrained? When his mind is agitated through over-energeticness, etc., then instead of developing the 3 enlightenment factors beginning with investigation of states, he should develop those beginning with tranquility. For this is said by the Blessed One, Bhikkhus, suppose a man wanted to extinguish a great mass of fire, and he put dry grass on it, and did not scatter dust on it. Would that man be able to extinguish that great mass of fire? No, Venerable Sir. So too, bhikkhus, when the mind is agitated, that is not the time to develop the investigation of states enlightenment factor, the energy enlightenment factor, or the happiness enlightenment factor. Why is that? Because an agitated mind cannot well be quieted by those states. When the mind is agitated, that is a time to develop the tranquility enlightenment factor, the concentration enlightenment factor, and the equanimity enlightenment factor. Why is that? Because an agitated mind can well be quieted by those states. Bhikkhus, suppose a man wanted to extinguish a great mass of fire, and he put wet grass on it and scattered dust on it. Would that man be able to extinguish that great mass of fire? Yes, Venerable Sir. And here, the development of tranquility, enlightenment factor, etc., should be understood as the nutriment for each one respectively. For this is said, bhikkhus, there is bodily tranquility and mental tranquility. Wise attention, much practice therein, is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen tranquility enlightenment factor, or leads to the growth, fulfillment, development, and perfection of the arisen tranquility enlightenment factor. Likewise, bhikkhus, there is a sign of serenity, the sign of non-diversion. Wise attention, much practice therein, is a nutriment for the arising of the unarisen concentration enlightenment factor, or it leads to the growth, fulfillment, development, and perfection of the arisen concentration enlightenment factor. Likewise, bhikkhus, there are states productive of the equanimity enlightenment factor. Wise attention, much practice therein, is the nutriment for the arising of the unarisen equanimity enlightenment factor, or it leads to the growth, fulfillment, development, and perfection of the arisen equanimity enlightenment factor. Herein, wise attention given to the three instances is attention occurring in arousing tranquility, etc., by observing the way in which they arouse in him earlier. The sign of serenity is a term for serenity itself, and non-diversion is a term for that too in the sense of non-distraction. There are besides 7 things that lead to the arising of the tranquility enlightenment factor. 1. Using superior food. 2. Living in a good climate. 3. Maintaining a pleasant posture. 4. Keeping to the middle. 5. Avoidance of violent persons. 6. Cultivation of persons tranquil in body. 7. Resoluteness upon that tranquility. 11 things lead to the rising of the concentration enlightenment factor. 1. Making the basis clean. 2. Skill in the sign. 3. Balancing the faculties. 4. Restraining the mind on occasion. 5. Exerting the mind on occasion. 6. Encouraging the listless mind by means of faith and a sense of urgency. 7. Looking on with equanimity at what is occurring rightly. 8. Avoidance of unconcentrated persons. 9. Cultivation of concentrated persons. 10. Reviewing of the jhanas and liberations. 11. Resoluteness upon that concentration. 5 things lead to the arising of the equanimity enlightenment factor. 1. Maintenance of neutrality towards living beings. 2. Maintenance of neutrality towards formations in inanimate things. 3. Avoidance of persons who show favoritism towards beings and formations. 4. Cultivation of persons who maintain neutrality towards beings and formations. 5. Resoluteness upon that equanimity. So by arousing these things in these ways, he develops the tranquility, enlightenment factor, as well as the others. This is how he restrains the mind on an occasion when it should be restrained. How does he encourage the mind on an occasion when it should be encouraged? When his mind is listless, owing to sluggishness in the exercise of understanding, or to failure to attain the bliss of peace, then he should stimulate it by reviewing the 8 grounds for a sense of urgency. These are the 4, namely, birth, aging, sickness, and death, with the suffering of the states of loss as the 5th, and also the suffering in the past rooted in the round of rebirths, the suffering in the future rooted in the round of rebirths, and the suffering in the present rooted in the search for nutriment. And he creates confidence by recollecting the special qualities of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is how he encourages the mind on an occasion when it should be encouraged. How does he look on at the mind with equanimity on an occasion when it should be looked on at with equanimity? When he is practicing in this way, and his mind follows the road of serenity, occurs evenly on the object, and is unidle, unagitated, and not listless, then he is not interested to exert or restrain or encourage it. He is like a charioteer when the horses are progressing evenly. This is how he looks on at the mind with equanimity on an occasion when it should be looked on at with equanimity. Avoidance of unconcentrated persons is keeping far away from persons who have never trodden the way of renunciation, who are busy with many affairs, and whose hearts are distracted. Cultivation of concentrated persons is approaching periodically persons who have trodden the way of renunciation and obtained concentration. Resoluteness upon that is the state of being resolute upon concentration. The meaning is giving concentration importance, tending, leaning, and inclining to concentration. This is how the 10-fold skill in concentration should be undertaken. Any man who acquires this sign, this 10-fold skill, will need to heed in order for absorption to gain, thus achieving his bolder goal. But if in spite of his efforts no result comes that might requite, his work still a wise wait persists, never this task relinquishing, since the Thiru, if he gives up thinking not to continue in the task, never gains distinction, here no matter how small at all. A man wise in temperament notices how his mind inclines. Energy and serenity, always he couples each to each. Now his mind, seeing that it holds back, he prods now the restraining rein, tightening, seeing it pull too hard, guiding with even pace the race. Well-controlled bees get the pollen, well-balanced efforts meet to treat, leaves, thread, and ships, and all tubes too, gain thus, not otherwise, the prize. Let him set aside this lax, also this agitated state, steering here his mind at the sign, as the bee and the rest suggest. The 5 similes. Here is the explanation of the meaning. When a too clever bee learns that a flower on a tree is blooming, it sets out hurriedly, overshoots the mark, turns back and arrives when the pollen is finished. And another, not clever enough bee, who sets out with too slow a speed arrives when the pollen is finished too. But the clever bee sets out with balanced speed, arrives with ease at the cluster of flowers, takes as much pollen as it pleases, and enjoys the honeydew. Again, when a surgeon's pupils are being trained in the use of the scalpel on a lotus leaf in a dish of water, one who is too clever applies the scalpel hurriedly and either cuts the lotus leaf in two or pushes it under the water. And another who is not clever enough does not even dare to touch it with the scalpel for fear of cutting it in two or pushing it under. But one who is clever shows the scalpel stroke on it by means of a balanced effort, and be good at his craft, he is rewarded on such occasions. Again, when the king announces anyone who can draw up a spider's thread 4 fathoms long shall receive 4,000, one man who is too clever breaks the spider's thread here and there by pulling it hurriedly, and another who is not clever enough does not dare to touch it with his hand for fear of breaking it. But a clever man pulls it out, starting from the end with a balanced effort, winds it on a stick, and so wins the prize. Again, a too clever skipper hoists full sails in a high wind and sends his ship adrift, and another not clever enough skipper lowers his sails in a light wind and remains where he is. But a clever skipper hoists full sails in a light wind, takes it half his sails in a high wind, and so arrives safely at his desired destination. Again, when a teacher says, anyone who fills the oil tube without spilling any oil will win a prize, one who is too clever fills it hurriedly out of greed for the prize, and he spills the oil, and another who is not clever enough does not dare to pour the oil at all for fear of spilling it, but one who is clever fills it with a balanced effort and wins the prize. Just as in these 5 similes, so too, when the sign arises, one bhikkhu forces his energy thinking, I shall soon reach absorption. Then his mind lapses into agitation because of his mind's overexerted energy, and he is prevented from reaching absorption. Another who sees the defect in overexertion slacks off his energy thinking, what is absorption to me now? Then his mind lapses into idleness because of his mind's too lax energy, and he too is prevented from reaching absorption. Yet another who frees his mind from idleness even when it is only slightly idle, and from agitation when only slightly agitated, confronting the sign with balanced effort, reaches absorption. One should be like the last named. It was with reference to this meaning that it was said above, well-controlled bees get the pollen, well-balanced efforts meet to treat, leaves, thread, and ships and all tubes too, gain thus not otherwise the prize. Let him set aside then this lacks, also his agitated state, steering here his mind at the sign, as the bee and the rest suggest.